Hello everyone, Cowabunga here. At the beginning of the year, I made a video that highlighted many of the unreleased platform fighters coming out this year, as well as some updates you could expect from already released platform fighting games. I made the bold claim that 2024 would be the year of platform fighters. Well, I wasn't that bold because I also said,
I wouldn't be surprised if 2025 is the year things really get good.
But anyway, you have seen the title of this video and I am here to say that yes, I was wrong. We are not at the end of the year just yet, but I think I can soundly make the claim that no platform fighting game will be making profound impacts in terms of their content releases or reach until next year at best. I wanted to go back on all the games I talked about within the previous video and tell you all why I think they didn't end up really lighting the world on fire this year. The first game I talked about was MultiVersus. At the time of making the previous video, I didn't know what to expect from the return of MultiVersus. I was hopeful that the game could address some key issues I and many others had with the beta. The big issues were the netcode, a need for more defensive options and/or a rework on dodges, and adjusting the balance of characters mainly by toning down hard-to-counter moves, adjusting hitboxes, and reducing the amount of infinites or touch-of-death combos down to none. When MultiVersus did eventually come back, it addressed some of those issues, but it hasn't felt like enough to a lot of players. The thing they really tackled was the netcode. In the beta, I would personally experience lots of lag, stutter, and rollbacks while playing, especially when new content was released. The netcode now is much more stable, with most matches I've played running pretty smoothly. It is extremely impressive how well the online runs for a 4-player rollback fighting game. Well done to the team. Infinites were a problem at the start of relaunch, but I think most of them have been patched out. Gotta keep an eye out on that Iron Giant guy though. He has had the most infinites out of any character in this dang game. It's kinda funny. I have not seen many zero to death combos. I think if there are any, they probably involve the use of Airwalker, so they're pretty limited. I had this whole little section about combo expression in general not being strong in the current version of the game, but this latest patch seems to have given lots of characters some new combo tools, so I'm just going to hold off on talking about that for now. When there are balance changes, sometimes they are good, sometimes they don't really change anything, and sometimes they make things worse in a bad way. Balancing a fighting game is harder than it seems, and they seem to try to make changes based on player feedback, so I wouldn't personally ask for any changes in their process. As far as I can tell, hitboxes are not the best still, but they again are taking player feedback to fix things, and they are trying to add mechanics to circumvent some stronger hitboxes. Mainly, it seems like jabs are the best option for many characters to throw out in neutral, so they are making it so that neutral attacks have priority over them to incentivize people to use them more too. I wouldn't say there's a very glaring issue with balance on any given character at this point. I think most of them just have one or two moves that are over-centralized in their neutral or combo game, which can be boring after a while. I think the biggest turnoffs for anybody who's had an interest in this game is the new pace of the game and its monetization. The monetization is the more simple thing to explain, so I'll go over that first. Between all the different currencies in the game, the battle pass, and the other things they do to try to make people spend money on the game, it can be pretty overwhelming to get a grasp on things. I personally think the UI in this game is all over the place. It's not too bad in most places, but it feels like there's a lot going on. I honestly feel like for these free-to-play games, this is kind of like the standard. I don't know why, but they just throw so many things at you and it looks so weird. And it's like, if you take a break from the game and come back, there's just all these things right in front of you that are all new, and they're like shiny little keys jangling in front of you, and the game wants you to interact with it, and if you don't want to interact with it, you just gotta keep exiting out of a whole bunch of pop-ups and yada yada yada. Now for gameplay, the biggest change to it was the decision to slow things down and make character models bigger. The overall movement speed across the board has been reduced, startup and end lag on moves is much more noticeable, and it doesn't look like the characters are just zipping around all over the place from a spectator perspective now. I think that's the main reason why these changes were made. The devs want MultiVersus to be a spectator-friendly game, and the beta was confusing to watch in 2v2s for people who never played the game. Now with increased visibility and slower everything, the game is better to digest while watching and playing. I don't think this was a popular decision. Many people thought the game was too slow and clunky at launch. For me, I think it was necessary to tone the speed down in order to allow players to, actually feel like they are playing a video game and not just a guessing game of where the opponent is going to be. Now, neutral does not just rely on positioning and if you used your dodge yet or not. I still think that many of the problems I have with the gameplay loop in the beta are still present now. That's mainly because while they have tried to address many issues with the game, things are just not there yet. Many mechanics meant to alleviate some pain points are just not practical enough to make gameplay more enjoyable. Parries are a great addition, but they are strict, and honestly from my experience the timing doesn't feel consistent. I usually don't think it's worth the risk to throw out unless I think I'm going to take a lot of damage or die. The new tech option is nice too, but I feel like it's pretty exploitable too. Since opponents know when a tech is going to happen, that will make it easier to potentially follow up and catch the tech to do more damage. At least there is a chance to get out of a loop now, but it feels like it still opens up the possibility of getting looped when you couldn't before if the opponent can guess where you will go. So overall, I think that many of the things introduced in this full release have felt like band-aid fixes that aren't entirely addressing the parts of the game that are not engaging. Interactions can feel pretty samey throughout the cast. Like, to me, Banana Guard is Shaggy with a disjoint. They feel pretty similar in their game plans. There's many characters that are cool, but they just don't use much of their kit because they are fishing to hit the stuff they know is hard to deal with. So even if you encounter, let's say, 5 different Jokers in a day, they are all likely to play the character the exact same as each other. There's no incentive to go outside of a flowchart in this game. I think people tolerate that type of thing in other platform fighters, but I think the biggest difference between MultiVersus and every other platform fighter is its emphasis on dodging as its only good defensive option. I like that dodging can be used for offense too, but dodging feels over-centralized. Maybe I wouldn't mind it being over-centralized if it felt good to play around. You can dodge out of most moves, which I kind of think creates a lot of problems. It doesn't feel worth it to try and whiff punish things unless you get in there in the perfect time. And if that's the case, you're not going to want to play the game offensively if there's no guarantee that your offense will be rewarded. I've experienced many situations where I try to punish something the opponent does, and they get a dodge out at the perfect time and hit me instead. In those situations, attack cooldown animations may indicate that there is a window of opportunity to strike, but it is usually a very short window, and I have gotten accustomed to resetting neutral instead of trying to push forward because of that. Sometimes the game does kind of boil down into dodge after dodge from both players until someone finally hits the other. That was a big problem in the beta for me that is still here, though not nearly as bad now. I personally think there needs to be another defensive option added to the game because disadvantage in this game can be rough. Sometimes you get juggled around without a feasible option to get out. Most of these things are pertaining to 1v1 gameplay. 2v2 is much more casual and laid back. I've talked about all these different things, but I think what ultimately brought down the hype for MultiVersus was its relaunch. It was disastrous. People all over social media were crapping all over this game. Many complaints were valid, like I saw a lot of things where people were mentioning the multiple features from the beta that disappeared. That combined with the aggressive monetization strategies made the game feel much less player-friendly. I don't think the game has recovered many fans and curious non-fans since. Many of the missing features are back, but there are still some not great monetization strategies being employed in the game. Again, it feels like a mobile game with how much stuff is in your face. New characters are put behind the battle pass or timed unlock windows where you can only get a character by paying money, or in the case of Agent Smith, spending a lot of time in single player. Which, hey, the single player to me is actually the biggest highlight of this full release. I know a lot of people have said, who asked for this? But I enjoy having something to do outside of online matches. Rift mode can actually provide some experiences I haven't seen in a platform fighter before. I think it's worth going into Rift mode because sometimes you even get to try content that is either going to appear in the online multiplayer later, or will never be available online at all. It feels like its own thing and I appreciate it. I do think though that if you have no interest in playing online and the gameplay loop is not hooking you, then you're not going to care about what the single player has to offer. Just some changes to the normal battles or minigames. I think they're on the right track with their general mechanic changes. They have made MultiVersus more satisfying and addicting to play, and that's the direction they need to go. Smash Bros. Is the king of being addictive. I think that's because the gameplay loop is very fleshed out. Everything involving the gameplay feels natural. I think MultiVersus could work on that. MultiVersus still has some mechanics that don't feel quite right. Sometimes they don't feel realistic, consistent, or snappy. I ain't saying the game has to turn itself into Smash, but there's a good reason why Smash looks and plays the way it does. It feels like an arcade game. It's simple to pick up, hard to master. Its rules are simple but challenging to tackle. It is responsible and flexible, which adds complexity and creativity. The gameplay systems in place complement each other, and while Smash is not perfect by any means, it can be understood, and if you're good at the game, you can control the pace of the match and do things your way. It's a game that allows you to play in a way to enhance your strengths and hide your weaknesses. I don't think MultiVersus does that as well as Smash, and that's why it feels less engaging. So the more they add ways to make characters more expressive and gameplay mechanics work better with each other, the better. I don't necessarily think that MultiVersus needs to add shields and grabs to accomplish engaging gameplay. Though I must say, just about every platform fighter that doesn't have that tried and true rock, paper, scissors system seems to lack something in gameplay. I think that if you want dodge to be the central mechanic of the game, you should let it do more. Personally, I'd like to see it not just be a dodge meter. Maybe it can be used for Roman cancels or bursts or other offensive and defensive purposes. My suggestion would be to add some kind of block that rapidly drains the dodge meter. It would help with disadvantage so much. Maybe those types of things could be locked behind certain perks because perks feel kind of underbaked right now too. Perks could allow for more player expression, but in their current state they aren't impactful or interesting for the most part. I have brought up many open-ended problems, so there's no clear solution for anything mentioned. I trust player-first games to be able to eventually figure most things out. I say most because Warner Bros. Is probably the reason why the monetization is handled in the way it is, and that's probably something that can't be improved upon that much. They probably also rush player-first games to throw out stuff when it might not be fully developed. While that is purely speculation, it seems like the state of the relaunch kind of proved that. I hope things get easier, and I hope Warner doesn't shoot itself in the foot so much that they end up seeing MultiVersus as a lost cause. These big companies do not actually care about providing entertainment for their fans. Warner scrapping all these movies and not giving their game devs the resources and time they need to make games thrive is evidence of this. Unfortunately, it's about shareholders and what they value, and they value metrics. They value how much money a company makes on a surface level most of the time. Enough bad faith decisions that make their audience angry could lead to shareholders bowing out, but if it doesn't cause enough of a stir on a financial side, they won't care. So it's scary. It's a bad time being a game dev working with a big company. If you don't hit it out of the park, you are prone to getting laid off for having a live service game like MultiVersus shut down. And seeing how this is MultiVersus' second chance, it's not likely they would get another chance from Warner if they aren't seeing the revenue they want out of the game. The platform fighting game audience is a hard one to please too, so I really don't envy the position Player First Games is in right now. I hope things turn out well though, because as much as people are fatigued on crossover stuff, I still get excited over that type of thing, and I wouldn't really want anything to compromise the playability of MultiVersus. I already experienced that in the time between the beta shutting down and the game relaunching, and I don't want to feel that again. MultiVersus has a place in the Platfighter community, and if it went away, it would leave a big hole. And honestly, for all the worries that I have, it is still doing better on a player count level than any other platform fighter I'm about to talk about by a wide margin, so maybe the dooming is not warranted. Again though, I do not trust Warner Brothers as far as I can throw them, and those are two grown men probably, so I couldn't throw them very far. I think 3 pages worth of words for MultiVersus is enough. The next game I covered in my previous video is Rivals 2. This game is not fully released yet, but there have been playtests for this game, and I think the game has been coming along very well. It is coming out in October, let's go. and has turned into a game that is making its audience very happy. Even with the absence of some vital Rivals 1 mechanics, I think that the core Rivals audience is really happy with how Rivals 2 is coming along, so that makes me happy. I think on full release, Rivals 2 will have a long way to go to be considered a legitimate equal to Smash, but I think on a gameplay and presentation level, it is well on its way, and those are the two important things you gotta nail. I think that as long as Rivals 2 builds on this foundation they have now, they should be very successful. I still don't think that success will peak right at launch this year, but Rivals 2 is looking to have set itself up for one of the most successful launches for any platform fighter since Smash Ultimate. I have seen how bad launches can affect a platform fighter for its entire lifespan, and thankfully Rivals 2 probably won't have the same fate. Platform fighters are hard to make special, but Aether Studios is doing a great job navigating that difficult path. I commend them and I hope their efforts pay off big time. Let's talk about Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 next. This game has done a lot of great stuff this year. They have released all their DLC characters, and on top of that they have added a bunch of additional single player content that has added so much replay value to the game. It feels like a full game that can challenge Smash in terms of what it has to offer. Of course, nothing is beating Smash Ultimate on replay value, but Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 has a lot of things that every Smash game offers, with its own flair to it. With that being said, outside of some big spikes in player count thanks to sales, or the game being on Xbox Game Pass, the game hasn't generated a lot of buzz. I think part of that is because the characters in the DLC pass were announced well beforehand, so that generates a lot less hype than announcing them close to release like these games usually do. There's also the thing of the game still being pretty buggy. I don't think it's as bad as it was, but there are still some things that could negatively impact somebody's experience. Many of the ones I have experienced are related to supers, and they've been there ever since the launch of the game. There have been some character-specific things that have been fixed, but there's still some questionable stuff in there. Iroh in general seems to not have the same level of polish as other characters. His hitboxes are the main issue I've seen the community talk about. I think the balance of the game is tricky too. They have made Korra the undisputed best character in the game when she was already really good. It's possible that there won't be another balance patch because it was said that the group working on Iroh in this last update was a, quote, skeleton crew. So that means that the team was down to the most essential members that could get the job done. That's not a good sign for any additional updates on the game. I think the only thing that we know for sure is that the team is working on a fix to a problem involving the matchmaking right now. Basically, the North American servers for the game have been down for, I think, months now, and they said they would fix that in an update. So if that is the case, we have at least one more update to look forward to, but who knows, they might just fix the server and call it a day. I would have thought it would have been fixed by now because they know what the issue is, but they do probably have to get the update approved across multiple platforms, so that can take a while sometimes. I think Nazby 2, despite having some jank, is a very solid platform fighter, so why doesn't it get as much love in the platform fighter community? I think it does come down to the hype factor. Nowadays, fighting games live and breathe off of their hype. I think Smash Bros. Really set that standard, where you have to have a very solid marketing plan around advertising additional content for your game that is new and exciting. Even though Nazby 2 doesn't slouch with its advertising, it all goes back to the DLC being known well in advance. Without that anticipation, there isn't much to look forward to. And again, the launch of the game wasn't great. It wasn't as bad as some other games, but it was obvious it could have had some more time in the oven to polish things out. That first impression is very important to the lifespan of a fighting game. That is when most people will be playing the game by far, and if it leaves any bad taste in a person's mouth, they will move on. If the launch didn't turn people off, the introduction of new bugs that caused a lot of problems, every patch probably did. The gaming sphere is competitive, especially now with live service games. It feels like they all compete for your time just as much as your money. You have to either have a very good gameplay loop or consistent content coming out at a fast pace if you want attention. While I think Nazby 2 is a very fun platform fighter, it doesn't quite have the same pomp and circumstance Smash and even something like Brawlhalla does. When the pool of characters you're picking from is just Nickelodeon characters, It's cool, but not as exciting as other things on the market. Which is crazy, because this means the standards for this type of game are so astronomically high. But that's kind of what it is. Gameplay doesn't mean everything. Sometimes the reputation of a game can slow its momentum too. I don't think NASB 2 has a bad reputation outside of being known for being kind of buggy, but I think NASB 1 probably left a bad taste in people's mouths. NASB 1 wasn't a bad game, but it was very bare bones at launch, and even with everything they did to that game post-launch, it was still lacking in some departments. As far as I can tell, NASB 2 was still a success, but it sold much less than the first game. It is a shame that the team continued to whittle down during DLC development, probably because the game was not as successful as executives would have hoped. I have seen a concerning thing from the former lead combat designer at Fairplay Labs. He said he was laid off because GameMail didn't seem to see a need to continue DLC development with the team at the size it was at. He says that he is not a part of Fairplay Labs at all at this point, and that he has not worked on another project since. Which implies to me that if there is a NASB 3 in the works, that people who were laid off or just left Fairplay Labs aren't working on it. It's a big shame because they did a great job with NASB 2, all things considered. But if they aren't helping with a potential third game, then who would? Ludosity again? How would that even turn out? I don't know. I think it's just more likely that there isn't going to be a third game, but I'm hoping I'm wrong. It seems like it is ultimately up to Nickelodeon and GameMill. What does Nickelodeon see in GameMill anyway? Those guys fund borderline shovelware at best. Can't they use someone else for something like this, man? Get THQ for a third game or something. I'm not holding my breath, but it would be nice. I know there's some good people who work at GameMill, but again, I'm kind of pointing the finger at the executives right now, the people who make the decisions. They don't seem like they're very smart to me. It especially sucks for me because this is like two of my favorite things coming together, Nick cartoons and platform fighters. The games do mean a lot to me even if I'm not super active in the community. I wish I could have some hope for a future for this series, but it's not looking good. Maybe in NASB fashion they will announce something out of nowhere one day, but I would be wary about a new game if Ludosity or Fairplay are not involved. The next game I will talk about is Framemakers. I thought this game was going to pop off a little bit more. I think the big thing that held back Framemakers' development this year was The Watcher. She took so much time and resources to make because of how complex her visuals are. The art team was exclusively working on her for months, and it took longer than the team thought it would to finish her. But she is in-game, she looks absolutely amazing, and she's been there for a little over a month, and there hasn't been new content in the game since. However, I think you can expect some more content added this year. The Lady Luck Assist will probably be the first new piece of content we get, and it seems like she'll be coming soon. Progress on the next character seems to be going much faster than the Watcher, so we will see if Team Frey can manage to get them out by the end of this year or beginning of next year. I think no matter what, the game is not going to pop off at any point this year. They still need to add much more of their promised content in order to generate a bigger fan base. The netcode could use some work too. I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon, but I look forward to the days where the game is much better, and hopefully, maybe there is a strong player base so quick play is actually populated. I have no doubt this game can get to that point, they're just going to do it at a slower pace. I talked about Spiritfall before, and that game did very well as far as I can tell. I'm glad because the single player experiences are just as important to highlight as the multiplayer focused stuff we usually get. That's mainly because many platform fighters on the market right now kinda neglect their single player offerings. Spiritfall is still updating the game with meaningful content, which you love to see. I don't know about the future of the game, it seems like they want to continue to support it for now, so I look forward to anything they do. Not much has happened with Combo Devil since the beginning of the year. I don't think there's been any new info since it was announced. I know they have been going to conventions to get people to play the game, but I think they are still looking for a publisher. I don't know how you could look at Combo Devils and not throw money at it if you're a game publisher, so it sucks that they haven't found someone yet. I'm sure it might have made development more difficult if they were expecting to have a publisher by now. The game is not coming out until next year, but I'd wonder if they don't find a publisher that they might have to delay it. I really hope not, but for a game as high quality as this, with the major talent that they have on board, they can't work on it for free. The funds gotta come in to keep the ball rolling, so I hope they get those funds for this unique take on the genre. I talked about Recursor briefly last time, and there's not been an update on it since April. That update mainly showed off some cool visual updates for the game. The creator of this game, Wills Blackett, works on many things, including Combo Devils, so that's one of the reasons why he has been quiet this year. Another reason he's been quiet is because he wants to do a proper marketing campaign for this game leading up to release. It still says the game is planned to be released in 2024 on Steam, so there might be news on this game sooner rather than later. I don't think this game will blow up in the platform fighting game community. At this point, we have seen some similar concepts of a roguelike platform fighter be playable. With that being said, I'm excited to see how this game compares to those other games, and I want to see how it differentiates itself. Next on the list is Cross Impact. Ooh buddy. So this game has been progressing along this year. As I predicted, it's not done anything crazy this year, and I expect that to continue based on what I'm seeing. It will continue to add content the best it can and get those backer characters in. There are some concerns I have with the game though. Since I have worked on the game and know people who work on it, and I like most of the people who work on it, I want to provide feedback for their sake. I think the number one thing this game needs is polish, without a doubt. Here's the picture I want to paint out. It seems like new content is being made at a steady pace for this game. However, I think there are areas of the game that need attention just as much as the new content. Mainly on an animation front. The main cast is looking pretty good right now for the most part. Stardrop is the main outlier though. He doesn't have a ton left to do on him, but it is still noticeable enough to where I'd personally like to see him be addressed sooner rather than later. There's also Fark, one of the newest characters to the game. I feel like he was kinda rushed out. His sprite work is not bad, but I think it's lacking in some ways. I can tell that there is some reused stuff across different moves, and he just seems stiff because of the lack of body movement or in between frames. It's not bad animation by any means, but I think the quality of it is not at the same level as, say, Pal or Cowboy. Really, you can kinda tell when a character has been animated by multiple people versus just one person, and it makes things a bit jarring because some animations are definitely better than others. But in those cases, I just tweak the animations. I don't think any of them need major overhauls. I know the small community playing the game has asked for some improvements on the movesets in general, which would require some animation work, so maybe that's why some things haven't been worked on. Personally, I know that Fark was not implemented exactly the way it was conceptualized, and as a fan of the Spark games myself, I'd like some small tweaks done to make Fark a bit more true to Spark 2. My concern is that with what I know about the development of this game, I don't know when tweaks to characters can be made. From what I can tell, adding content is the number one priority of the game currently. It makes sense. New players will usually gravitate towards new characters the most, and people paid for most of the new characters coming out, so you want to deliver them in a timely manner. However, I'm worried that new characters could be similar to Fark, and that they may need polishing on the animation and or implementation side of things. And if that happens for every new character, then the to-do list for this game will really start to pile up. That also just runs the risk of making the person who paid $1,000 for a character upset if they come out looking rushed in any way. I know that Dallin works on a lot of things, so I wouldn't want it to be any harder for him than it already is, moving things along. I think as the director, he knows what he can handle, but I just want to say that for his sake, I hope that he does take the time to make sure content is the best that it can be on release. As a playtester, I'll try my best to be more transparent about my thoughts on things in the future. Recently, Workshop was added to the game, which is cool because it has also become free, so anyone interested should be able to add content to the game. The Workshop seems easy to grasp, but I have seen that it is pretty bare bones in terms of what the tool allows you to do. There also seems to be some ways in which the Workshop messes with the game, like adding Workshop characters to arcade mode and screwing it up, among other things. And don't get me started on that Workshop trailer. I'm gonna refrain from talking about it for my own sanity and the sanity of the people working on the game. Ultimately, this game is the definition of a budget game. Like, everything is being created with a small budget, and that's just because there are no feasible revenue avenues that can support the game on its own outside of personal finances. When it was paid, it wasn't getting enough sales, probably. I think there's so many reasons why it didn't sell, but the biggest thing has probably been a lack of creativity in what the game offers and a lack of dedicated community playing online. It'd certainly help if some of the online crashes were weeded out like right now, ASAP, but I still don't think there'd ever be a dedicated community for the game as things stand now. The lack of a clear identity for the game is a problem. Sometimes the presentation of the game, whether it's in-game or not, it feels like it's trying to be too similar to Smash. Outside of the roster, there isn't anything that makes Cross Impact stand out. And there is no standout character in Cross Impact that would impress anybody within the hardcore platform fighting game audience that Cross Impact is catering to on a gameplay or visual level. For example, the idea of Jacket or V1 being in a platform fighter is awesome, but their execution in Cross Impact is not as cool as many Rivals Workshop characters I've played. There are some glimpses of greatness in there, but the inconsistent sprite work hides it a bit at times. There are less mechanics in the game than there are in Smash, and the meter concept has been played out in other games. Though to be fair, Cross Impact was one of the first platform fighters I saw using a multi-purpose meter during its development. The gameplay mechanics in Cross Impact, they don't really seem bad, but it's like, man, I just don't think it's as compelling as something like Smash or some other games on the market right now. The game always had that problem, even going back to when I worked on it, where we tried to figure out how to make the gameplay fun while adding less to it so that we can stay within a budget. It's just really hard, man. I wish it had that extra spice to it, but I just don't know if that's feasible at this point. The plans for this game seem pretty set in stone, and this game has always been a passion project anyway. I don't think the goal of this game was ever to make money. It was just something Dallin wanted to do after what happened to Indie Rumble. I want people to see the hard work the team has put into the game, but the polish needs to be prioritized along with the content creation. I think the marketing and management of the reputation surrounding the game needs to be focused. I don't want the game to shoot itself in the foot over and over again over simple, easy to avoid things. Just take your time, be careful, and continue to take in feedback and find room for improvement in the roadmap. As long as you do that, things will look up. I talked about Sentinels Inc. before, and I have no real update about the game. Nothing has been shown off for a really long time now. I have seen from one of the lead devs that it's just been hard to work on the game effectively. And yeah, that sounds about right. Game dev is very hard, and they are moving from Platform Fighter Engine to a custom engine, which can't be fun. I'm still very excited about the game though. Probably out of all the platform fighters coming out, this is the one that resonates with me the most. It has some cool mechanics and great visuals with an original IP that means something to the dev team, so I don't know what else you could ask for there. And we are down to the last game I talked about in my previous video, Toon All-Star Slam. This game has continued to give small weekly updates on characters throughout the whole year. It's something that motivates the team to get something done every week, which is a great strategy. They have shown a lot of things for a lot of different characters. They have shown new stages among other updates. The game seems to be coming along nicely. Their strategy of working on many characters over a long period of time so that they can lessen the gap between new updates seems like it should pay off. The next update will probably come out this year, and I look forward to it for sure. It seems like it's going to be a big one. The team is doing a lot of things right, and the passion and detail shines through as always. Alright, so we went over everything that I talked about in the previous video. Hooray! But I saw your comments in the last video. I saw that you guys wanted me to talk about other platform fighters. So since I haven't done a scripted video in a long while, I'll indulge you just so you can have some bonus content, alright? What about Brawlhalla? Brawlhalla is Brawlhalla. It is doing its thing and it will continue to do its thing and be successful. There's not really much to talk about with it, honestly. What about Smack Studio? Smack Studio did have its full release a couple months ago, and it seems like it's doing okay for itself. It has a small dedicated community, but it's not blowing up the genre or anything. It's not a bad game, I'd recommend it. You just gotta get past the jank looking pixel art and you have a decently fun game. Rushdown Revolt is getting a full release. Yes, at this point it has. It is a free-to-play game that is basically being run by the community on the development side. It hasn't really popped off, and I'm guessing it's just because of how much more difficult it is compared to every other game in the genre. Its mechanics are rock solid, but it is hard to get used to all the things you gotta take advantage of. The general mechanics of the game are deep, and many characters have a lot of creative freedom that makes them hard to master. There are some more beginner-friendly characters in there, but you still gotta know your stuff to optimize combos and not put yourself in bad situations. I think it'd be fun for somebody who wants to and has the time to figure everything out, but again, it's a competition for time within this industry. If someone has something they already put many hours into, they are more likely just to stick with that. Okay, we are almost at the end, so I want to conclude by generally explaining the patterns I'm seeing that these new platform fighters that are struggling are sharing. I think most of them are struggling to fund their games to meet their scope. That's probably the biggest thing because this encompasses a lot of smaller problems. Those problems being scope creep, less funding bringing less opportunity to have higher quality assets, and if you're working with a big company or publisher, you usually have funding, but it comes with the risk of the team being smaller or getting laid off completely at unexpected times. I think another thing that a lot of smaller platform fighters struggle with that I haven't discussed too much is advertising. Now, advertising is extremely hard. Your game's success revolves around algorithms picking up whatever you put out. Even games that get a lot of attention have a hard time putting their game out there because the most likely thing to happen on social media is that there might be one or two viral things that get on people's feeds, but then everything else gets no attention from these algorithms. But I still think some plat fighters I've talked about could do better. Many of them do the bare minimum at the very least, which isn't bad, but some probably leave their socials silent for too long. I think a very important thing too is that a new platform fighter should have solid gameplay that makes itself distinct from Smash and other well-known platform fighters. At the very least, if you're going to have less gameplay mechanics than Smash, make the game compelling by increasing the risk and reward of the mechanics that were carried over, or add some new stuff that complements the lack of other mechanics. It's not easy to do a game that has more robust mechanics than Smash because there's already so much that goes into Smash. I think that's why many of these games gravitate towards doing less mechanics, but I rarely see that work out for these games. But no matter what, you've got to make yourself unique and also better than most of the other stuff that is out. Like, you can't be better than Smash, but some other games like Rivals of Aether have set standards that anyone making a plat fighter should emulate. And honestly, you should aim to be better than Rivals because it still has some bare-bone things to it, mainly with its single player. It's not an easy task at all, and really, this all comes back to having a proper view of the scope of your game to make sure that you can tackle what you're able to sustain. Sometimes it is okay to make a smaller game that has a small fan base. Success doesn't have to come with big numbers and a bunch of attention. The only other thing I could pinpoint is online being a problem for some of these games. Bad netcode kills fighting games. It's as simple as that. Just make sure it is as good as it can be. Okay, I'm gonna go before my voice gives out. Subscribe and become a channel member to get access to 100 plus exclusive videos. Thanks, bye.